Merhaba, Anthony.
Merhaba, Scott. How are you?
I'm being persecuted by technology today.
Tell me about it. I know the feeling.
It seems like all the air conditioners, the laptops, fridges, they're all annoying me today. My fridge has a really nasty habit of every now and again starting to make a really loud noise that gets louder and louder and then makes clunking noises. My air conditioner does the same, and now my laptop started making noises, and it sounds like it's on its last leg. So that's
dear.
Good. Yeah.
Well, my internet connection is highly dodgy tonight, so I'm guessing we're going to have to do this in segments.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes anyway. But today we were going to talk about political correctness. Is that right?
Yeah. Let's.
And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yes. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I'll start off a little bit of an intro by saying that talking about political correctness. I personally hate it in pretty much all forms. But I mean, just to sort of give an overview, it's political correctness is obviously being careful not to offend or upset any group of people in society who are believed to have a disadvantage. I mean, the point, and I'll probably come back to it later, I want to make is that most of the time it's not the victims or the offended that are actually complaining. It's another group of people, the PC brigade, I call them, and some other people do. For me, it's just another form of control. It seems to me freedom of speech is dying fast anyway. That's being attacked on all fronts, and I refer you to Cameron's UN speech again for that. And I think people who support political correctness to a large degree, I think within a few years, when they're sitting in a government re-education centre for saying something that they shouldn't have said when their neighbours reported them to the authorities, then maybe they'll regret supporting political correctness. And I wanted to say that we're going to brainstorm some ideas and opinions about this topic today, but I also want to say, actually, that word itself, brainstorming, apparently a UK council has banned the term brainstorming.
Why is that?
And do you know what they've replaced it with?
Nope.
Thought showers.
Oh my god.
And excuse me.
Could we just enhance that a little by adding the word golden?
I don't know about that. That's very politically incorrect. But apparently a group of local lawmakers thought the term may offend epileptics.
Oh, Jesus.
Because it's like brainstorming is connected to epileptics, apparently. And anyway, I'll continue. I mean, basically... Oh, actually, sorry, I need to apologise again, because apparently it's not okay to refer to people as epileptics. According to the charitable organisation Epilepsy, there's a debate on whether to use the word epileptic or even words like fit or seizure. And they said basically it's important to look at the person before the medical condition. Thereby they prefer to say people with epilepsy, not epileptics. And in terms of whether to use the term seizure or fit, they suggest that you need to actually talk to the individual that you're referring to find out what they prefer. And this is I've just been saying that to give you an example of how ridiculous things have come. You literally almost cannot say anything these days. The thought police are watching you. It's straight out of George Orwell's 1984. I mean, Back in the 1990s, lots of jokes were made about political correctness, and everybody thought they were kind of really funny. But now, I think it's becoming beyond funny. I think it's becoming serious. Political correctness has become a way of life in many countries. And if you say the wrong thing now, you can lose your job. You can end up in court. Every single day, the mainstream media bombards people with subtle messages that make it clear what's appropriate to say and what's inappropriate today, and most people fall in line with this unwritten speech code, and I think it's imbalanced. Basically, some, for example, when it comes down to minority groups or religions, some are promoted over more than others. And cultural groups can be promoted in an imbalanced way compared to others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem with political correctness, and I don't know if I'm sure you'll tell me in a minute whether you agree, but I think most people who are racist or sexist are usually quite open about it. I've met racists and sexist people before, and they're actually very open about it. So those caught in a political correctness trap, they're usually not racist or sexist, but they're just being caught in this new maze of words that we have to choose from. What's your views on political correctness?
Well, I'm a little divided. I mean, I think there are two main parts. There's the part mostly concerned with language, and there's the part which is concerned with action. And I think we need to talk about both. But so far, you've mainly talked about language, and I've got a foot in either camp, to be honest.
Anthony, I have to stop you. You can't use the word camp. It would offend homosexuals. So you need to, even if you've used it in a different context, it's still offensive. So
oh dear.
I think you need to retract that word.
Can I say that I've got one foot on either side of the fence?
I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. That might offend. That may offend practitioners of genital. Never mind. So yeah, look, I'm going to come at this partly from an Australian point of view, just because I've heard a lot of the debates in Australia, more so than in other countries, and I don't know if the arguments are similar in the UK. So let's compare as we go along. In Australia, I've seen three main arguments against what they call the PC Brigade. The first one is about freedom of speech, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about that. The second argument is that the PC Brigade are kind of basically a bunch of latte liberals. They look down on the uneducated masses from their inner city Sydney cafes and so on. And according to that argument, the PC Brigade, they feel like they need to enforce a respectful code of speech on everybody else.
Actually, I have to stop you again, Anthony. I'm offended that you say latte liberals, because you seem to be suggesting there's a certain group of people who order their lattes, and you're actually grouping me in with that, because I sometimes have the odd latte, and I'm quite offended by that.
Oh my God. You liberal. But yeah, the idea is that the criticism is that these people feel like if they don't guide people from above, then everybody else will just devolve into kind of racist, homophobic bigots, and eventually kind of coalesce into a big lynch mob. So in other words, the anti-PC folk say that political correctness is a form of elitism, and it shows a kind of loathing for ordinary people. So that's the second criticism that I've heard. The other argument is that PC is an expression of what economists call positional good or positionality. Now, this positionality is something that we're all familiar with. It's when people try to show that they have a relatively high position in the social hierarchy. And one way they do this is by consuming or acquiring things that supposedly say something about them. Yeah. So maybe for example, I buy a brand of an expensive brand of wine, and partly it's because I like the taste, but maybe it's also a way of setting myself apart from other people by showing that I'm somebody who understands, the finer things in life and so on. And this carries a positional good. It helps me position myself highly in the social hierarchy. And this is something we know that, marketers and advertisers exploit all the time, but it extends way beyond just what products you buy. It can be about what university you choose to study at. And in the 90s, when this terminology was appearing, there was even this idea that being alternative offered some positionality to young people. So they could complain that their old favourite bands had all sold out or whatever, and that would position them well on the social hierarchy. So the anti-PC people in Australia say that PC language is just another form of this. So by using the right language, you're positioning yourself more highly on this kind of imaginary ladder, that has enlightened and open and tolerant people at the top and ignorant racist idiots at the bottom. And if you criticize other people for not being more PC, then you're pushing them down the ladder for your own benefit.
Okay.
That's the criticism. Of course, if that's true, then being PC actually has nothing to do with caring for other people at all. So I don't know. That's the debate in Australia.
I don't know, to be honest. I think there's a number of groups that are for and against political correctness, but I guess different people have their different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But just generally, I don't like it.
Sure. Okay. Well, look. I want to say in some cases, I agree with some of those arguments, or maybe all of them. But in other cases, I think they totally miss the point because the issues here are actually a lot simpler sometimes. I mean, you know, we've all seen instances where a person says something and then they get shouted down because what they've said might offend someone, and then you think it through and you think, what is the big deal with what that person said, you know? And then you realize, well, the PC Nazis are just being, you know, precious and silly, and you just kind of want them to go away so we can all talk like adults, you know. But I think it's dangerous to generalize about that because I don't think that's always the case. And in some cases, I would fully support the PC Brigade, and I want to give you an example. This comes from the rather dark and disturbing world of Australian sport. There's a former rugby player in Australia called Andrew Johns, who's considered to be one of the great rugby league players of all time. Now, for those who don't know, rugby league is an Australian football code, and it's like a kind of, I would say, a vastly dumbed down version of rugby union, you know. So not what you'd call a thinking man's game, but Johns was a master of the game, and he retired in.
Anthony, I have to stop you. You said thinking man's game.
Oops.
You're not being very inclusive there.
I'm not.
Surely sometimes women like to watch that.
That's true. Okay, so it's not what you'd call a thinking person's game, or indeed a thinking being's game.
You're excluding insects there.
But no, Johns he retired in 2007. Then he went into coaching, and he coached the New South Wales Rugby League team. Right? Now the biggest matches on the Rugby League's annual calendar are between New South Wales versus Queensland, because those are the two Australian states where league is most popular, and there are 3 of these matches every year. In 2010, just before one of those matches, a New South Wales player called Timana Tahu caused a huge stir by pulling out of the New South Wales team. Now, Tahu's father was a New Zealand Maori, and his original, and he withdrew from the team.
Sorry, you cut out there. Can you?
Sure. Now, Tahu's father was a New Zealand Maori, and his mother was an Australian Aboriginal, and he withdrew from the team because of something that Andrew Johns had said during a training session. Mm-hmm. Apparently, Johns had called one of the players on the opposing team, and I'm quoting him here, he called one of the players a black cunt, right? So Tahu objected to this, offensive characterization of a black player, and he left just before the game. That made it into the Australian press, and then a bunch of other stuff about Johns started to emerge, and we had, the full-blown controversy on our hands. So players started admitting that they'd heard this guy, Andrew Johns, this league legend, they'd heard him regularly using racist epithets to refer to black players. He was using terms like nigger and black bastard and monkey and coon.
Anthony, you're a racist. you just used lots of racist words there.
I did. I'm sorry.
So you are a racist.
Well,
because
okay.
I just wanted to make a quick point. When I said that, I was just one thing I've noticed about political correctness is that nobody cares about the context that the word's been used in. So you were quite obviously there talking about using those words to explain the situation, but a lot of people in the PC brigade don't care. They don't care they don't care what the context is. You are now a racist for using those words.
Well, this is true, but in this case, the anti-PC brigade, I think, were used the context as an excuse. But not so with football players. Among football players, including black football players, there was quite a range of reactions. So some of them were grievously offended, and they pointed out that racist sledging could really distract them, and when it happens to them, it can have a negative effect on how they play. and there are others who felt, kind of offended, but not, all that seriously. And then others just shrugged it off, oh, this is part of life in Australia, which unfortunately is true. Now, I think all of those responses are valid, but in the media, there were voices defending Andrew Johns in some ways which I think are unacceptable. You can partly understand the motivation because, like I said, he was a great player, he was a rugby legend and so on, and nobody likes to see the image of a champion tarnished. What's his name? Lance Armstrong. Similarly, I think people were willing to suspend disbelief for a while because he was such a great champion. But in this case, you had a lot of pathetic excuses. People in the media were saying that, in the rough and tumble of professional sport, sometimes strong language is used as a kind of motivator to get people fired up, and it's part of the intensity of the game and so on. And the people who were saying those things were trying to recast this whole thing as an attack by the PC brigade, which it wasn't. The other side who were criticising Johns, they were just saying, look, you're bringing down the tone of public speech. You're in a position where, a lot of league fans, a lot of rugby fans are kids, yeah, and it's not a great example to set for them to run around calling other people black cunts. And I don't think that's being excessively PC, but it was attacked as that at the time. If professional sports people are saying, look, this guy pissed me off so much that I couldn't concentrate and I couldn't play, and he was doing it all the time, well, then I think the onus is on him to clean up his act a little and be a bit more respectful.
I completely understand that, but I guess it is connected to political correctness, but I would just say he sounds like a bit of a nasty piece of work anyway.
He absolutely is.
He's trying to motivate people by insulting them, and I think there is a line to be drawn between political correctness and insulting people. If you're constantly insulting people and using racist terminology constantly, it's a bit different to political correctness, where often in political correctness cases, it's a one word that offends people. Whereas in this case, he's reeling off constantly. He's doing this constantly and being abusive and insulting.
Yeah, but the issue here is that the anti-PC people jumped on it as a chance to say, oh look, political correctness gone mad, when it wasn't at all, And I live in a society that has free speech, and it's true that, for example, in the world of academia, free speech is being eroded by the need to be politically correct. I think that's a very disturbing trend. In academic papers, there are an increasing number of things which you just can't say, and that's awful. Are you there?
Yeah, still listening.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
I was still offended by some of the things you've said so far.
I'm sorry. But it's, by the way, it's particularly I'm going off script here, but never mind. It's particularly disturbing in America because some of the early American founding fathers and so forth specifically said that in an academic context there is no idea which is not allowed in, provided we still have logic with which to refute the bad ones. So in other words, it's open slather, say what you like, is kind of enshrined in the early history of the States, and the States is unfortunately one of the epicenters of PC thinking, and that is eroding academic research. But if we go back to sport for a moment, if we go to this case, I also want to live in a society where people generally show respect. And I don't think that's excessively PC.
That's true. But I think with political correctness and with using certain words, it's the intent that matters. And the guy that you mentioned, his intent wasn't good. He was deliberately being abusive, insulting. In a lot of political correctness cases, these people aren't necessarily trying to be abusive or insulting. Yeah, it's just that they didn't know the correct terminology to use. And I think also with a lot of these cases, people should be able to say whatever they like, even this guy maybe, but they should deal with the repercussions.
Yes.
So say what you like, there may be repercussions. That's what I would say.
Fair enough, fair enough. I want to give you another example, and I think you're going to like this one. Because this is where I depart from PC. I think sometimes, in terms of just the language, the language of PC, I think sometimes people just become so obsessed with correct language that it kind of overshadows everything else, and it becomes ridiculous, and ironic in some cases. Again, this example comes from an Australian source. There's a guy called Brendan O'Neill. He's the editor of an Australian magazine called Spiked, and he's a bit of an anti-PC campaigner. He's been talking about this for years. So he gave an example from the US invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. During that invasion, some soldiers in the US Navy were writing messages for the Taliban on the sides of their missiles, which we've seen before. Now, in reference to the September 11th hijackings, this one soldier wrote the words, "Hijack this, you faggots," on the side of a missile, right? And he got caught. I don't know, it turned up in a photo or on film or whatever. Now, you would think that at a time of conflict, I think you would think the Navy would flag the issue, but maybe, shelve it for another time when they didn't have quite so many other urgent things to deal with. But apparently not. It caused a huge stir. Everything stopped, and the Navy command was described as being outraged, right? So they issued a statement, and the statement said, I'm going to quote again here because I think it's